Hey, welcome to the Hell Has an Exit podcast. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com. Hey, welcome to Hell Has an Exit. I'm your host, Bryan Alzate. On this show, we interview a lot of recovering addicts. I have my boy Tommy here today. If you guys are new to the podcast, please like and subscribe. We are now full video on YouTube. If you guys want to check out upcoming episodes and clips, we're very active on Instagram at Hell Has an Exit. That's about it. So, Tom, you're from Detroit.
Yeah. Born in California, raised outside of Detroit, Michigan. I usually use Detroit for Michigan, where I'm from, because everybody knows that. If I told people I'm from Garden City, Michigan, they're like, "What's that?" And the closest city I got is Detroit. Plus, when you tell people you're from Garden City, it doesn't sound as cool.
That's cool. Yeah,
right?
It's like me with Davie in Fort Lauderdale.
Yeah. It's just it's an association thing, man. You know. And to be honest, man, like when I first came down here, and I had my when you met me, I had a year clean. When I first came down here, I thought I had to have this idea of who I thought Tommy, not even Tommy Kraus, more specifically Tommy Guns was supposed to be. So in my mind, it's I got to tell people I'm from Detroit. This is the lifestyle. You know what I mean? And some of it was true. Some of it was just this is just me filling in the blanks and what I think I'm supposed to be. You know what I mean? But the reality is I grew up in a small suburb in Garden City, Michigan. I would visit my dad in California, and the only time I was really around Detroit wasn't until I started doing drugs and then being involved in the party scene. So it would be an unfair statement to say I'm from Detroit as if I grew up there, and the people that I know that are from there that would be yeah, you're not from here.
Yeah, I was talking to my buddy because he was saying that he's from New York, and then we found out that he moved to New York later. So we're trying to think the time range of where you can say you're from a place.
Right.
And I was I would say it would be 6 to 15.
Yeah.
That's really if you live there between those times, or
you
at least you could say you're from there.
Yeah.
But if you moved there at I don't know, maybe 12 to 15, I don't know if you can say you're really from there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, at the same time, it's a lot of molding is done at, 13 to 18.
Yeah. Yep. How do I say it? Telling people the Detroit thing at first was more so just trying to get in cool with people. But the reality of it is when I got clean, Bryan, I didn't like myself so much so to the point that I didn't even see that what was left was valuable enough to show to people. You know what I mean? I got clean and immediately all I had was this ego. That's normal for people when they start recovery. Everybody I've watched usually starts with ego in some capacity. But what happened with me was 6 months into my recovery, that's when social media first started really blowing up beyond just MySpace and occasional things people tweeted and put on Facebook. So at that time that I got clean, 6 months into that process, I wrote a song for a friend of mine that had passed away, and it went viral, and I didn't even know what that meant. You know what I mean? I didn't know what going viral meant or any of that kind of stuff. I literally wrote a song, put it on Facebook for a friend of mine that I recorded with my cell phone inside my sober living home, and then signed out of Facebook because I didn't have an app with Facebook yet. That's when I got clean, right? And then a couple days later, I signed on to Facebook again, and I got messages from people in other countries saying they seen the video.
Yeah,
and,
I remember when you got clean, your shit was blowing up.
Blowing up, man. Yeah. I was getting 500,000 views on some of my videos, and they weren't even all that good. It was just me talking, you know what I mean? But because of that, it gave me a lot of attention that went to my head, you know what I mean?
Were you getting a lot of attention because you were talking about being in recovery?
I think so. I think really
I think you were one of the first people to really publicly do that on a big, that already kind of had a big platform, because you already had a music platform already and fans. You know what I mean? So I think when you started doing that, no one was doing that. No one was hi, I'm so-and-so, and now I'm in recovery, and this is what's going on with me.
The closest we had to it was Eminem Recovery, but even on that album, he talks about some issues, but he's not really going into his recovery process. Yeah, which probably would have been a great album had he done that.
He doesn't do a lot of interviews or anything like that either.
Yeah. I had a following in music and stuff before recovery, but because of addiction, I could never really capitalize on it. What happened when I got into recovery this time was the guy that I wanted to sponsor me, shout out Paulie G, I'm sure you'll be watching this. Paulie told me, listen, I can't compete with the money you're making at your job as a welder, and I can't compete with what you're going to get from people when you make music. So I'm not even going to work with you unless you're willing to humble yourself for will you quit that job, go get a job, make a minimum wage somewhere because you don't need that kind of money? And can you commit to not doing anything music related for the first 6 months and just focusing on your steps, coming to meetings with me and that kind of stuff? And like, dude, I wasn't like, yes, let's do that. Like, because up until that point, the only other release that I had besides drugs was music. Yeah. So you're telling me that to leave it alone, like...
Yeah, it's so crazy because I had someone that was like into music and they were like really wanting to do their music. And I was like, you might want to leave this alone for a little bit. Because, it's an outlet and it's fun and it's creative, but it's like that's also been like all you do and all you know.
Right.
And there's like pressure to like make more. And like, hey, you might want to.
And it's a party crowd, man. At the end of the day, like, you go to shows to party usually.
Like, I remember one of my first sponsors said, why don't you brush your teeth with your left hand? And I was like, why? He's like, so you just do something different.
Right.
And it's just like these stupid things that you think are like so dumb that have no point. Like, why would I not do music for 6 months?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
But it really gets you to do what you don't want to do. And I think that that's kind of like the basis of getting clean is like you have to start doing the things you don't want to do.
Exactly. And that's, at that point in my life, like, I didn't know anything about 12 steps, but I knew this Pauly guy like seemed like he was having a good time without drugs. And I knew he did drugs way worse than I did because he was like an IV drug user in like the Cass Corridor, which was like bad parts of Detroit, man. People that used there didn't use there because it was fun. They used there because they had nowhere else to go, And this guy is like, he's showing up to meetings in like a trench coat and combat boots and just like looks like Charles Manson and shit. But he's like, everybody loves him. And to me, it was just so weird. So I'm like, okay, like everybody loves this guy. He's not high. I'm going to at least see what he has to say. And basically how he hooked me was, he goes, if you commit to me for 6 months and don't focus on music and just focus on the 12 steps, I promise you in 6 months, he's like, you're going to have such better content to write about that your career is going to go further. And he goes, if you really learn these 12 steps, you'll be able to talk the panties off any girl that you meet. But what he didn't tell me was at the end of that is when you start working the 12 steps, like you get this thing called a conscience, right? I think what he was trying to do was just like trick me into like, if you work for the next 6 months, like maybe you'll get laid, maybe your music will do all right. He probably didn't know, but it worked for me.
I tell all my sponsors that.
Yeah. You're going to be a famous SoundCloud rapper. Just stick with me.
Now let's back up. So your life, what was like childhood like? When did you start using? When did you get into music? Because I don't know like any of that.
I didn't start using drugs until my freshman year. And even then, it didn't really take off. Like prior to me starting to do drugs and stuff, like I really don't go a whole lot into this part of the story, but I'll share it with you just because like I feel like it's necessary. Like I came from, multiple divorce family, by the time I was in high school, my mom had remarried 3 times. My dad has multiple children with different women and that kind of stuff. So my understanding of family and security is kind of fractured. I don't really understand it maybe the way somebody else does. And just because somebody else has a whole family too doesn't mean they don't have problems. So I'm not saying anybody out there that like, if you come from, every family has problems, right? But at that time, I didn't have any other coping mechanisms. I had a dad I didn't really know. I had men that were called my dad that I didn't really know, that I didn't want a relationship with. And I had my mom who wanted a relationship with me, but had to work so much just to keep food on the table and a roof over my head that I didn't get a whole lot of time with her. So I already had all the makings for escapism. I didn't like my house. I didn't like my home. So my escapism back then was like watching wrestling, reading comics, drawing. I was really into drawing as a kid. Never thought about music or any of that kind of stuff. But from the time I was old enough to hold anything, I was drawing in my books, all my kids' books. Like I drew my own pictures in my Dr. Seuss books and stuff like that. So my first, 12, 13 years of my life, I was pretty much just like a loner. Like I had some friends, but my friends did the same shit we did. We would get together and like they would draw and we would make our own comics. We weren't like doing the same shit most kids were doing. So I had all the makings of like isolation, secluding myself from others, escapism and all of that. By the time I was a freshman in high school, I was getting frustrated with the way things were going at home and stuff. So like I smoked weed for my first time before taking, not the SATs, but like they had these tests in Michigan. I can't remember what they are, but they got the Scantrons
like
and all
the
that.
FCAT,
Yeah, all that shit. They're trying to figure out if the school's actually doing a good job or not raising you.
Yeah.
So I smoked weed that day. Loved it, thought it was amazing. And, by the time school was over, I was sober. So I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like I could smoke weed in the morning. School's a lot better. Yeah. And then like when I get home at the end of the day, I'm fine. Like it didn't really bite at first. I smoked weed one more time after that. I stole right away. I remember stealing like $5 out of my stepdad's change jar. So like right from the jump, you know what I mean? The stealing already came. I felt entitled to taking from other people. But the drugs really didn't bite until I moved to California. I ran away from home after my 9th grade year to move to California to live with my dad, who was out there with his wife and kids. I moved out to California for 10th grade. My 10th grade year, I was like on the varsity swim team, water polo, youth group, going to church. I was a dork. Like, but I thought I was all right. You know what I mean? Like I'm athletically in shape. I'm living in Southern California. I got some friends. My life is all right. And I thought I was doing okay. The summer between my 10th and 11th grade year, the church that I was going to, it's always funny that it starts with the church, but the church that I was going to offered to send all the kids in the youth group, all these teenage kids, to Hawaii. With other teenage kids from all over the West Coast for this, like, 4,000 or 5,000 kids in Hawaii for like this youth group gathering.
That's so crazy.
Where we're supposed to like get close to God.
Yeah.
You put a bunch of horny teenagers on a paradise island. What do you think's going to happen? You know what I mean? So while I was there, I ended up meeting this girl. She like pulled me aside and she was like, are you doing this because like you really want to commit your life to God? Or are you just doing this to make other people happy? I remember at the time just kind of being like, no, I really want to commit my life to God. You know what I mean? But like, that shit never left. You know what I mean? Like, I sat there staring up at the stars, talking to what I thought was God that night. Like, I don't even know if you exist, and I'm ready to, like, give my life to you. Like, if you're real, you better, like, show up, because I'm not so sure I'm ready to do this anymore. And I left Hawaii. I think my parents sent me there thinking that I was going to come back, like, charged up for God and ready. And I came back. I broke up with my girlfriend. My buddy Dustin was like, what do you want to do? And the first thing I said was, I want to get high. And he looked at me and was like, dude, you don't even do drugs. Like, what are you talking about? And we went and got some weed that day. And from that day forward, there wasn't a day that went by until I made it into Narcotics Anonymous that I didn't have some kind of something. I can get into all the details of what that was like, but like basically what happened right out the rip was I started becoming lying, manipulative. Within a month after me smoking weed, I'm doing meth, coke. In my mind,
a month after that.
Wow. Friends of mine in school were not laughing, but like they were like, "Dude, you just smoked weed for the first time a few weeks ago, and you're coming into school asking us where to get crack and heroin." And in my mind, it wasn't that like the weed wasn't good enough. In my mind, I was like, they lied to us about weed, so they probably lied to us about everything else. I smoked weed, and they told me I was gonna end up like that shit in the commercial. You know what I mean? And nothing like that happened.
Was the girl like fold into the couch?
All of that shit, man. Like all of that stuff, man. I mean, that shit, like in the 80s, they slam that stuff down your throat. So in my mind, I'm thinking the first time I get high, I'm going to be like one of those commercials, right? And I didn't. So then my mind state was like, well, if weed feels this good, like,
what are the other drugs?
What are the other drugs like? And friends tried to get in between me and that stuff, but it was just fate, whatever you want to call it. Within 2 months after, getting high for the first time in California, I'm getting kicked out of school, getting in all sorts of trouble. Within a year after that, I almost caught my first felony charge. I had stolen my stepmom's Rolex and thought that I could, give it to my drug dealer and he was going to give me some meth for it. You know what I mean? And I had just turned 18. 9/11 was a few weeks before that. My stepmom figured out that I stole her Rolex.
How much meth did you get for the Rolex?
Dude, I didn't even get a gram.
What?
Yeah. I didn't even get a gram, bro. No, dude, I didn't even get a gram. And this is like, looking back.
How much is a gram of meth?
I mean, it's been a long time since I bought it, but I want to say like around $100, maybe. I don't know. Yeah, so definitely not like Rolex money, right? It was besides that too. Like that watch was like my stepmom's at her grandma. I didn't know any of that kind of stuff, right? All I could think about was I wanted to get high, seen the watch, and I heard people talking about you could pawn stuff up. So in that moment, I made a split-second decision, stole the watch, tried to pawn it, got like $100 worth of drugs for it. And then my mom found out that I stole it. She tried to press charges. I don't know if she actually did it, but she definitely called the cops. Cops found me. Basically were like, you're an adult. Now you're 18, so we can charge you with a felony in the state of California. But the cop was pretty much just like, listen, you're like a loser junkie. I don't really care what you do. Like, if you can get the watch back to your mom in 24 hours, like, we'll act like this didn't happen.
Cool.
My mind state at that time was like, all right, I'm going to go join the military to get this charge dropped from me. Because I know I'm not going to get the Rolex back because I gave it to a drug dealer. And then, like, if I become, like, a soldier, maybe my family will forgive me in a few years.
You still weren't doing music?
Still wasn't into music then or anything like that. Had gotten into poetry, but mostly did it just, like, as, like, an extracurricular activity. There really wasn't, like, a music thing behind it. What was that? So, like, a year after I was out there, I overdosed for my first time. Just, like, all this bad shit just started happening. Like, I was working as a caterer in Cal State Long Beach. And I was stealing the money from like what we would make selling like booze and that kind of stuff at weddings. And then I was buying coke with it and then coming to work high. And my boss would be like, we know it's you. It'd be so obvious it was me because nobody else would look like me. You know what I mean? But I didn't think I had a problem even with like the overdoses, even with that kind of stuff back then. And all I thought about that at the time was like, if I just go here, everything will be all right. So then it was like, well, if I leave California and go back to Michigan and get back to Detroit, everything will be all right. You know, and it was just a mess, you know, and somewhere in between me leaving California with a full-blown drug problem.
Wait, did you join the military?
I did not. Okay. Thank God for that. No disrespect to anybody that did, but I would have not done a good job with that being my mind state at the time. My stepmom's sister luckily got a hold of me and was like, listen, 9/11 just happened. You don't have any education. You don't have any background. They're just going to send you overseas and you're going to end up sprayed up in a cave somewhere. So if you still want to do that, why don't you get sobered up first and then, you know, see if that's what you want to do. But the only time I ever sobered up until NA was just enough to get the shit off of my back, whatever it was. You know what I mean? So I get a bunch of trouble in California, get kicked out of there, you know, blah, blah, blah. I'm not allowed around any of the people I'm around out there. So I moved back to Michigan. And when I came back to Michigan, I was working at this donut shop, became friends with this guy named Bryan, ironically. And Bryan had a friend named Jay, and they used to ride around in their Grand Marquis rolling up blunts and freestyling. So when I started hanging out with them, they'd smoke blunts, pass it to me, and they'd be freestyling. You know, so all I was thinking about was like some of the poetry I'd written down and like trying to figure out like, okay, they're rhyming, like, can I put this to the beat? You know what I mean? And that was kind of like how I first got into it. But then like what's kind of started happening was the better I got at it, the other guy that was riding with this that used to be like the guy that could rap out of the group, like I got better than him. You know what I mean? And then I was like, dude, like I can actually do this kind of shit. And then I ended up meeting this chick named Angel, you know, another ironic name. And Angel, I didn't have tattoos. I didn't even have a name to myself. I was just Tommy, you know what I mean? And when I was dating Angel knew that I would take, at the time when I first started performing, I would only perform if I took ecstasy or did coke before I went on stage because I had such horrible stage fright and I felt like I couldn't hit the pocket the way I needed to, that my mind convinced me, well, if I take ecstasy, I'll hear the music better, or if I take coke, I'll be able to rap faster, you know? And after doing this a few times, one night me and Angel were driving home from whatever show I was doing, and she was like, you know, do you really think you need the drugs to do this? And like I gave her all my reasons, and she was like, well, here's the deal. Like, I know that you can rap and I don't think you need the drugs anymore. I'm cool with you smoking weed, but like, I don't really want to buy you ecstasy or coke anymore. So if you want to have sex, you're going to start learning how to freestyle for me without the drugs while we're driving around. And she would light up a blunt and put on beats in her car and just drive all around until I would start freestyling. Wow. And then she would give me content to talk about and just throw out subjects to me. And that's how I got good at it. Plus, at the end of it, when it was all done, I knew I was going to get laid. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that was my introduction into music. And then she was also like my first manager, for lack of a better term, because we would go to clubs and what she would do is she would run into the bathrooms with her girlfriend and she would talk really loud so the other girls would hear them in there. And she'd be like, oh my God, this guy Tommy Guns is here tonight. He's going to be performing. It's going to be blah. Wow. And she would hype them all up. So these girls in there would be like, who? Oh my God. Yeah. You know, and I was a nobody, bro. You know what I mean? But she made me sound so cool to other people that like it ended up opening doors for me. And so I got into it. I went by the name Articulate. That's what I got tattooed here. You know, I ran with it. You know, I started putting out music, started putting out whatever I could at the time. Social media really wasn't there yet to give us the platform like it is now. So back then it was like recording with equipment way less than this, and then like dubbing it onto a burned CD, and then like going to a show and hoping to God like you could convince somebody to give you $5 to take it. Wow. You know what I mean? And like I watched MySpace come online and like went to the Detroit hip hop convention when they were like, you guys need to start utilizing social media to get your music out there, and like taught us how to do that. So the whole time my music is doing well, I'm still on drugs, you know what I mean? I'm still getting high and whatever, but I'm justifying it because now I'm making something. You know, I'm not just getting high and sitting alone. I'm making music while I'm high, and I'm seeing the rewards of it. I'm getting to perform. I'm getting to do things that felt really cool. Flash forward, and now it's, you know, 2010. I am out in California. My music's doing better than it ever has before, but I also have a full-blown opiate addiction now at this point. I'm getting sponsored by clothing companies out there. My music's doing really well.
When did you start getting the tattoos?
18.
Okay.
Yeah, 18. But all underneath my clothes so you couldn't see them. Okay. I didn't start doing my face until I got sober. A lot of people were like, oh, you probably did all of that when you were clean or before you were on drugs. And hand to God, every single tattoo that's on my face right now, I did completely sober. So as much as I'd love to say.
Even the neck?
Even the neck. All that stuff was totally sober.
I think I remember the neck.
Yeah. The neck, I'm trying to think what I got done in Florida. I got the rose done in Florida.
I remember that.
But anyways, yeah. So this whole time I'm doing drugs, music, all this kind of stuff. But like, I'm never able to capitalize on anything, you know, and I would get like this close. Like in 2010, I was nominated for the Urban Underground's Male Solo Hip Hop Artist of the Year. I got to go out, the red carpet, all that shit. I'm in Hollywood, like thinking I'm on top of the world. Meanwhile, I got a mouthful of fentanyl patches, a pocket full of whatever, Oxys, Roxys, whatever. I'm stealing from my job. I'm stealing from my sister. I'm stealing from everything. So I have these two conflicting worlds. One world saying you're great, you're amazing, you're dope. And the other world, like you're a piece of shit, you're a degenerate, you're a scumbag. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so I got to backtrack up a little bit. In 2008, that's when I really, really started dedicating myself to music. And the reason why was because in 2007, I want to say, I met a man by the name of Vic, and he had a record label called Outskirts Entertainment. And I went and recorded with him a song, and I met his sister, and his sister told us afterwards that she thought that me and him were going to do really well, and that this was the best thing that he had been involved in a while. And then a few months after that, she died from cancer. And I'd never known anybody that knew somebody like that died that way. So like me and Vic got close during that time. I started recording music at his house. I got really tight with his sons, who were all little boys. And Vic used to tell me, I don't care if you come over here and you want to have a beer, smoke some weed, and make some music, but my kids can't see you on coke. They can't see you on pills. Tommy, they look at you like an older brother. Like you can't be over here doing that stuff. So basically the deal Vic made for me back then was, so long as you don't do the hard stuff, you can come over here and record, and then we're going to put out a full project. That was in 2007 going into 2008. In April of 2008, I went over to my mom and my stepdad's house in Garden City to have Easter dinner with the family. Hung out with my little brother. He was going to be turning 18 that year. And he pulled me aside and he was like, listen, dude, like, I'm not going to lie. For years, you've been handing me your music and it's all been terrible and embarrassing to even say I got an older brother that thinks he can rap. But my brother was raw like that. But he's like, you gave me a CD in the last few months. And I got to be honest, like, this is actually good. And I show it to my friends and I'm not embarrassed to say, like, this is my older brother.
That's cool.
And it was all that stuff I was working on with Vic. I was like, well, you know, you're going to be 18 and, you know, this summer. And if you want to, you can come to my shows and you can start getting to know your brother outside of what you knew me as a little kid, you know? And like, we kind of talked and joked about it, whatever. And like, I left that day with my girlfriend. And when we left, my girl looked over at me and she was like, I don't know why it was so weird when we were leaving, but I kept feeling like I wasn't going to see your brother ever again. And I kept just like staring at him and getting that weird feeling.
Oh, she said that?
So we go home. We're up fighting and arguing all night long because I date toxic women. That's my thing. We're up fighting and arguing all night long. And the next morning I wake up and I see I got a missed call from my mom, like super early in the morning. So I check my voicemail and it's her crying, you know, there's been an accident and you need to come home as soon as possible. So I'm thinking like a car accident, grandma's hurt, grandpa's hurt, right? So I call her phone and it's like 6:45 in the morning and her best friend Edie answers. So right away I'm like, why is Edie answering my mom's cell phone, you know? And Edie was like all confused and she was just like, Tommy, there's been an accident. It's a family emergency. Just drop whatever you're doing. Come on. I'm like, what happened? Tell me what happened, you know? And she was like, well, your brother had an accident with a gun. And I'm like, I just seen him last night. Like, did he go hunting? Like, how did he have an accident with a gun? You know? And she's like, he might have shot himself. He's still alive. You need to get home immediately. Me and my girl stop arguing. When we get in the car, we float over there. And it was like showing up to a scene from like a scary movie. You know, I pulled up to my house that I grew up in. And anybody that knows where I grew up in Garden City, I grew up literally in a house with a white picket fence. You know what I mean? They tease me about that kind of stuff up there. Like, oh, you act like you grew up hard and you got a white picket fence. You know what I mean? But so I pull up and there's the white picket fence out front. But there's like a scene going on, you know? And it's like I'm watching like an episode of Cops or 911. Like it still wasn't registering that this was my house. And then, you know, when I get in there, you know, everybody kind of starts telling me what happened. My brother had found my dad's gun and he had kept the ammunition separate from it and gotten to the ammo too. And I don't know if he was shooting himself with the intention to take his life, if he was playing with the gun and it went off. Wow. There's so many different things that came with that. We were told that because he had to make an effort to get the bullets and then had to get the gun, there was thought behind this. So the detectives were kind of like, this was suicide. Ruled as a suicide.
Oh my God.
So
zero signs of mental illness before?
I wasn't around him a whole lot. And let's say, even if there was mental illness, you got to figure, man, up until recently, people didn't even really know how to talk about it, much less tell you what it was. Looking back, I can say probably, I want to say 100% for sure, but maybe slightly, that my brother could have been dealing with like possibly being on the autism spectrum scale, highly functioning kind of thing. Asperger's, I think they might call it, maybe like on that end, because there was all these signs up until then that you just didn't notice. We just thought he was really particular. But hindsight being 2020, plus you get involved, I start working in mental health, I start learning these things, and it's like, wow, Chad displayed a lot of those characteristics. And back then they didn't even really know. He was born in 1990. Autism really has just become a normalized conversation in the last 3 or 4 years. Really. I mean, it's been going on since you were a kid, but I haven't heard people talk about it the way they talk about it now.
Yeah.
You know, when I was a kid, they talked about it kind of like, almost like you talked about people that had Down syndrome.
Yeah. It was just, like being mentally retarded was the same as autism.
Yeah. So I didn't know the difference. You know what I mean? So anyways, there wasn't like, and here's the thing too, you know, this is something that I learned about by going to like survivors of suicide and talking to other people is Hollywood will give you this impression that suicide has all these warning signs, letters, and all this drama that comes with it. More often than not, when somebody takes their life, there's not going to be a letter or a warning or anything like that, other than signs that you see afterwards. They've gotten to such a place of despair and pain that they wouldn't even necessarily know how to write that letter because they know that that's going to cause you pain.
It's like an Irish goodbye. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're not trying to make it.
And my brother was not like a vengeful person. So let's say he wanted to commit suicide. He wasn't doing it to hurt other people. He was doing
it for
it
attention or whatever.
He would have been doing it because he wanted to end his own pain, right? So him even writing a letter to my family would have been him hurting them. So it's possible he wrote a letter, you know, I don't know. But from everything that my family has explained to me, the only warning signs that they really got were the ones that they learned about afterwards. Prior to that, they just thought it was just like a regular teenager kind of thing. My brother and his dad's relationship wasn't the greatest. So like him growing up in that environment and not having a California to run away to like I did, I think kind of made him feel trapped. And I'm not saying he did it because of my parents, but I know if I was in his situation and didn't have California and knew there was a gun in the house, I can't say I wouldn't have done the same because that's where my head was at. My mental health was so poor at that point in my life. So I try to put myself in my brother's shoes. He didn't do drugs. He stuck at home. He wasn't like super popular and had a ton of friends that were like trying to hang out with him all the time. He could be a bit of a pain in the ass because possibly of maybe his OCD and stuff, you know what I mean? So the people that loved him in spite of some of his characteristics that made it difficult, you know what I mean? So afterwards, it was like, I didn't even really start picking up the pieces to that, Bryan, until like, my brother died in 2008, and I really didn't address it until probably like 2016, 2017, you know? So when that happened in 2008, I didn't really have an opiate problem at the time. I was just smoking weed and drinking. I'd stopped the other stuff. A few months after that incident happened with my brother, I had gotten jumped, and I had to have facial reconstructive surgery. Wow. And they put all of this back together, and while I was in there, I was put on OxyContin.
Was it like a drug thing?
Me getting jumped?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was drinking someplace I shouldn't have been. I'd love to give you a bunch of other stories to it, but really I wouldn't have been there if I wasn't doing dumb shit. You know what I mean? So did I deserve it? Probably not, but I was where I shouldn't have been.
Yeah.
And if I wasn't doing what I was doing, that probably wouldn't have happened. This was in August of 2008. This is in Detroit, so it's humid out. I get out of the hospital and I'm like shaking and freezing and like, you know what I mean? Can't figure out what's wrong with me. And my buddy comes over and
Is that how you got introduced to opiates?
I tried them before, but they never bit.
Yeah.
They never bit.
That's
it was like something somebody would pass to me and I'd do a little bump or I'd take a pill and I was like, this is cool. But like when I first started doing drugs, I was like team go, not team slow. I liked meth. I liked coke. I liked ecstasy. I liked being go. Then it kind of segued into like psychedelics and I'm going to like find myself in spiritual planes. And by the time I got to like meth and heroin, it was just like, fuck life. I don't want to feel anything, you know? So 2008, that happened.
You come out of it's freezing.
Yeah, you know, I come out of the hospital. I feel like I'm freezing. My buddy looks at my discharge papers. He's like, oh, this is why. Hold on a second. Goes out to his car, comes back in. He's got a big giant orange bottle and it had like Vicodin 750s. My mouth was wired shut. I had just enough room where my wisdom teeth were at, where they used to be, so I could push the pill back in there and like pop it in the hole. And I took 2 of them. 5 minutes later, I feel fine. You know what I mean? And this is what stuck. He left, and my buddy Vic that I was making music with was like, dude, we have one more song we need to record to finish this album. I know your jaw is broken. I know your brother passed away, but you really need to just finish this, and then we can finish this project off. And I hadn't touched music since he had passed away because every time I went into the studio and tried to get in front of a microphone, I just lost it. That day when he invited me over, I remember I put on, Wyclef Jean did a remix to No Woman, No Cry. And I put that on my headphones and I started riding my bike over to his house. And I started crying, thinking about my brother and my sister and my mom and my dad and what happened to my family. But it was the first time that I cried where I felt okay crying.
Mm-hmm.
And I associated that with the drugs. Any other time that it came on, that feeling, I had an anxiety attack and I would fold. I couldn't even embrace the pain because it was just too overwhelming. Mm-hmm. Opiates, at least at that time, allowed me to confront what I thought was my feelings for my brother dying. Yeah. Looking back, I was confronting grief, but I was also really taking everything I could from that situation and spinning it into a really good story as to why I deserve to do what I do now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because drugs have like this freedom feeling of like, you think it's like this spiritual feeling or like some real feeling, but there's like this poison mixed in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it doesn't, like, you can't separate the two.
Right.
And once that kind of gets in there, because, you know, when you say like, you know, it didn't bite, like, you know, there's a lot of ways I've tried to describe that, but that makes a lot of sense because like I did opiates a couple of times before I really got bit, before I really was like, oh shit, you know, even with crack. The first time I smoked crack, I was like, that was crack, that's it. The second time I smoked crack, I was like, oh fuck, you know, like that was crack. And a lot of times, you know, it's coupled with like the environment and like a situation, whereas like someone can drink and not have any issues and like their dad dies and then they drink and then that turns into numbing the pain instead of like enjoying something to like.
That's where I think the obsession came on for me, at least, because, you know, doing coke and doing meth, the only obsession I would really have is like while I'm high,
you want more,
wanting more. But as soon as I came down, I would be like, ugh, I don't want to touch that shit again for a while. There wasn't like a wake up in the morning and like I want to do more. It was like, why did I do that? You know, with opiates, what happened was like it became, opiates didn't really get me like high as a kite like other drugs did. But what they did that was deceptive was like they helped my brain reinterpret the way I experienced pain. It gave me a false sense of security because in my mind what I thought was, well, if I'm taking these pills and I'm going to work and I'm functioning, then I'm doing what I need to be a productive member of society. So that
and peppy.
Yeah.
Like,
I got energy. Like a lot of people don't know that too. Opiates, before you get naughty, like you get like shit tons of, and that would be the giveaway because I never cleaned anything. I never did anything until I got high, and then I'd get high and my sister would be like, my house is spotless and you're flying all over the place. Like what the hell is wrong with you?
A lot of times people imagine opiate high and they see someone drooling. But the pre-stage...
That's like stage 4 opiate high.
That's like stage 4 opiate high. But the first one is like, oh man, I feel so good. I'm going to go and do this. You feel so great. Go wash the car. I remember washing my parents' cars and my dad looking outside and being like, honey, how high does he have to be washing the fucking cars right now?
Without you asking. Just I'm going to do it.
Doing opiates makes washing cars enjoyable in like 105 degree weather.
It makes a lot of shit enjoyable. I was working in toxic waste environments, like no cap in Detroit. We had a job I was doing where one of the jobs was to remove all the hazardous waste material outside of the big three, outside of GM. And I mean, you could only imagine what a factory like that pulls out. And I'm going in there with like a little plastic bodysuit, nothing protecting me, and like jumping in this shit waist deep, high as a kite, and like getting accolades from my managers because they're like, yeah, Tommy ain't afraid to do shit. Meanwhile, I'm high as a kite, all this pepped up energy to do this kind of stuff, you know? So I had a lot of external validation that I was doing something right, which made it, I think, that much worse, you know? Plus music at the time, I because my brother passed away in 2008 while I was working on that album, and then my mouth was wired shut before I could do my record release party. The night that I did my record release party on August 8th, 2008, I did it with my mouth wired shut after getting out of the hospital a week before. So that got me notoriety in the hip hop community there. People were like, they wanted to come see this. They were like teasing me, like calling me Kanye and shit because I'm rapping through the wire at the show and stuff, right? So I got my family life in total mess, me trying to take off with music, and both of these worlds kind of going like this. Like I said, flash forward, I was in LA 2010. Things were going great, but I still couldn't capitalize on it. Come back to Michigan. It's 2012, midsummer hits. I got a full-blown heroin addiction again, and my mom messages me because I was trying to manipulate her for money, and she said something to the tune of like, I've already buried one of my sons. How you're behaving is not how I raised you to be, and if this is who you're going to continue to be, then don't contact me anymore. She basically was saying both of her sons were dead to her in so many words, which my mom is the kind of mom.
Did your family support your music career, or were they just like, who cares? Like, did they care? Did they want you to
My family
go
didn't
to
get
college
behind
or whatever?
Oh yeah. They wanted me to, like I said, I was on, before I did drugs, I was varsity swim team, water polo, like I was really good in English and in history and that kind of stuff. So I didn't have like where I had no other options. My family thought I was going to do all right. You know what I mean? And when I got into music, they looked at me like trying to be like a Vanilla Ice. They weren't like, oh, this is great, we're going to get behind you. They didn't even understand that type of music, much less why I was doing it.
Yeah.
They didn't really get behind my music until I got sober this time.
Gotcha.
They still didn't get behind it in the beginning. They didn't get behind it until they started to see that I wasn't making it for me anymore, and that the music that I was making was helping other people and influencing people in a positive way. And those people's mothers started contacting my mom and dad saying what I'd done for their son or the impact their music had on their family or whatever it was. So I think then they started to see like, you were doing this for more than just trying to be cool. You know, this is something different. You know what I mean? So.
Okay, so it's 2012.
2012. Music is doing good, but mom's like, you're basically dead to me. I get a message from this guy, Shane, who was my producer at the time, Foulmouth. Got to check him out. His music's super dope. And he messages me and he's like, you haven't been to my studio in like 3 months. The last time you were here, you drank all my apple juice and then you filled it up with water and put it back in the fridge. And I didn't really think about it at the time, but you were acting super weird. And then you like nodded out standing over me. And you know, I grew up with a dad that was a heroin addict. And I got to be honest, dude, like, I can't believe I didn't see it sooner. Like, you're a junkie. You're not allowed at my studio anymore. Don't come over here. You're a waste of talent. And this guy like cut into me. He was not sugarcoating anything. And I really respected him as like an artist too, not just, and so to be told I'm banned from the studio, because of my drug addiction, like that was an eye opener because that was like the only place I could go do drugs and not have people judge me usually because I was making music. So at the time I kind of was like, all right, I guess I'll go to rehab. But my goal to go to rehab was like, I'm on probation. I need to get off probation. If I stay clean for a year, maybe I can get back in good with my mom. And none of it was like, I want to change my life because it's a mess. I still had moves in my mind that I hadn't shot yet. I just was trying to get, the problems that I created off my back. So I went to rehab in 2012, in August of 2012, and I stayed clean for the entire time, 16 months that I was on probation. But as soon as I got off probation, that day I was smoking weed. Yeah. And the worst thing that happened was nothing happened right away. Or at least I thought nothing happened. I didn't realize that I'd already becoming lying, insidious, doing all that shit again that you guys had talked about in the meetings. And it all kind of came to like a head at Christmas 2012 or 2013 going into 2014. I was dating a social worker at the time. We were together for about a year. We had an apartment, just got a dog, and like everything was going in the direction like I was supposed to marry this girl. Then I started smoking weed and got off probation. That was in October of 2013. And by December of 2013, 2 months later, she had left Christmas Eve and went and stayed with her mom because she was scared of me because I was acting so insane. And I hadn't even picked up hard drugs yet, but my mental health had deteriorated so badly that I was like raging out and being insane. And I wasn't hurting her, but it was scaring her. Yeah. So she left. Her mom was a retired substance abuse counselor. She contacted me and was like, if you're not using, it's coming. I'm getting my daughter away from you before it's a problem. I stayed using for a few months again after that. And then like my aha moment was like, it wasn't because I ran out of money or because there was a cop or judge or anything. My aha moment was in 2014. I was living with my buddy Kevin and I was still doing dope and still drinking. I was working at a scrap yard and I would steal scrap from the scrap yard that I was at, and then I would take it to another yard and sell it. So it just all day long was like the ways and means, right? And I came home that day and I had my heroin and I had my pills and I had my booze and I had my cigarettes and I had this stuff all laid out on this little like nightstand. And I remember like I got down on my knees to like start like getting high and doing whatever. And like I just had this moment where like I could see myself, and I remember like looking at it going like, what the fuck is wrong with me? Like, I'm going to have to put all of this in my body to just feel semi-okay. I'm not even high anymore. I'm literally working full time, like from the moment the sun comes up until it goes down to hand all this money to my drug dealer. Yeah. It's not like I quit right then and there, but I get on Facebook and I started looking at people that I knew were still in the rooms and like they looked happy, they looked content in a way that I didn't know how to be. And so I reached out to them and I was like, I need help. And they got me into this rehab, Sacred Heart in Memphis, Michigan. this is what's so cool about all of this, right? Like this part of the story, I don't really share outside of friends like this because it's too weird to share like in a 12-step meeting. It's just, but right. So in 2014, I go to rehab, and on the way there, my stepdad says to me, you know, that he's proud of me. For what? I'm going to rehab for the second time, you know? And he's like, the judge isn't telling you to go. A relationship isn't telling you to go. A job isn't telling you to go. Like, you still have a life, and you're choosing to take responsibility for how you feel. And that's something that a man does. And I respect you for that. And you should be proud of yourself. I needed to hear that, but not in that situation. And then the next thing he says to me is, when you get there, tell them everything. You don't know what's keeping you sick. Plus, you don't know what you might share that might have an impact on somebody else. Right? So just tell them everything.
Was he in recovery or anything?
No, but he was in counseling for his son's suicide.
Okay, so he knew.
And he recognized that his anger issues had a lot to do with that. So even if it's anger, drugs, whatever, it's always the same philosophy, right? It's always the same principles behind it, you know? So he got it. He just didn't know the specifics, you know? So I get there and I meet with my counselor, and I sit down with her, and she starts asking me these stories, and I'm telling her my story like I just told you. And we get to this part where she's like, you know, what's your relationship like with your God? You know, what do you think about God? You know, do you have a God? Do you have a higher power? This kind of stuff. And I just remember kind of looking at her and being like, the only thing that I've ever had that was close to like a God-like experience in my life, I was so under the influence of drugs, I'm not even sure it was God. So she said, well, tell me. And so I tell her about when I was probably 18, I had gotten kicked out of my first like sober living kind of home for troubled teens, you know, and I went to an after hours bar that night. I took 10 hits of ecstasy on the way there. Got there was people selling acid. I bought a 10 strip, took most of it, gave a couple of hits to my friends. Another guy shows up, he's got mushrooms. I'm eating these things like potato chips. Somebody else shows up, I'm sniffing ketamine. Now they got a nitrous tank, and I'm huffing laughing gas while on ecstasy, acid, mushrooms, just everything, you know? And at some point, somebody decided at this party that it would be a good idea to put on Requiem for a Dream, which is a horrible movie sober, but when you're on like every drug under the sun.
Man, you know, so weird is that was one of the only DVDs I had, and when I used to smoke crack,
would you watch it?
I used to put it on
and torture yourself.
But the worst thing is that when it would play, it would just go back to the main screen, which was the game show music.
The worst.
And it would just play and play. And I
excited. Be excited. Bro, I'm telling you, I know that movie like the back of my head. Yeah.
And I remember smoking crack and being like, after this hit, I'm going to turn it off.
Yeah.
And I just would never turn it off.
Yeah.
And do that whole thing just like ruin my brain. Like that shit is so horrible.
It's a horrible movie. It's a horrible movie, but it's a real movie. And everybody was watching it at this party. I'm on every drug under the sun. And do you remember the scene in the movie where he's like running down the pier, calling his girlfriend's name, Marion, right? And then like he falls off the pier and he's in the fucking ER and he's got his arm cut off, and it's just, it all comes to an end. When he falls off of that pier, I don't see him fall off the pier. I see my friends watch me fall. And then I have an out-of-body experience, and I watch my body hit the ground in this party, and then I watch all these people get up in the party and surround me, and they're all like laughing and like talking shit, like fucking loser, can't handle his drugs, blah, blah, blah. But like I'm watching it like I'm somebody standing there looking at me, and I'm so confused, like how can I see me on the ground, you know? And at some point, the security guard had picked me up by my neck and like my belt and threw me out in the alley to like get me out of the party because like I was seizing out and acting weird and shit, you know? And when I hit the ground, I didn't hit the ground in an alley in Detroit. My brain sent me into it. It was like you painted over my eyelids, right? I went into this totally other world. And literally when I hit the ground, it was like I was in the same party that I just left, but nobody could see me. And that everybody was in their own world and nobody could hear anybody. Nobody could see anybody. And they were all so lonely that they wanted to die and they couldn't die, but they didn't realize that all they had to do was turn to the right and there was somebody there. They were so self-absorbed. They were in a party and didn't know that there was anybody else there. And I'm watching this, freaking out, thinking I'm still at the party, like running up to people, like, can you see me? And I keep having this moment of like, something's not right. Something's not right. And then eventually all of this illusion kind of fell and I'm in total darkness. And all I hear is like, for lack of a better term, what I could equate to like the voice of God being like, I gave you an awesome life. Granted, you had a lot of issues in it and whatnot, but there's also a lot of beauty that's in your life and you're constantly trying to escape it. And like, this is not what I have planned for you. This is what you are creating for yourself. And if this is what you want, then here you can have it. And as soon as he said that, all I could hear was like all my parents, my family, my sister, my brother, everybody crying, praying to God, angry with him that I was dead, and him being like, this is what I get to deal with because of your choices. I'm blamed now for your choices. Your family's not going to talk to me for your choices,
Wow.
you know? And then it was just, I was totally alone. It was the most isolated feeling I've ever felt before because hell, up until that moment, had always been like a place of torture and fire and everything. But every picture I'd ever seen of hell before that, there was always a lot of people in hell. So it didn't look that lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Hell for me in that instance was complete separation from God. Every time I tried to cry, I realized I didn't have a body. I didn't have any eyes to make tears with.
Mm-hmm.
When I would try to scream out for help, I didn't have a mouth to call out for help. I couldn't call on God's name to say, come help me. When I would try to tell myself, time heals all wounds, so this will end eventually, I would remember there's no sun where I'm at. I'm in total darkness. I have no concept of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I became absolutely aware of what eternity meant in that moment. There was no beginning, there was no end, and I was completely separate from God, and it was the most horrific feeling I ever felt in my life because I never knew a loneliness like that.
Mm-hmm.
And while I'm sitting in this like hallucination, shaking and just thinking that like I ended my life, like this like warm light kind of comes on in it, you know? And it felt like somebody like lit a match. It was like that soft, warm light, but it felt warm, and I felt warmth, and I hadn't felt anything other than just isolation and loneliness in that vision. And when I felt that warmth, I heard a very calm voice, like it was somebody that I knew, say, have you had enough? And like I screamed out, like, please make it stop. Yes, I've had enough. Please make it stop. And the voice was like, I'm not doing this to you. You are. And you can make this stop at any time. This is all your own doing. And when he said that, he was like, stop being ashamed and look up. And I stopped shaking in this vision, and I look up and I see, for lack of a better term, what I imagined to be God. And it was like the shape of a person, but there was this pulse. And every time it pulsed, I could see a different life come out of him. Every single human being that had existed from the beginning of time to the end of time, animals, every creation was just emitting from this. No words, just pulse. Love, 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 love. I got no words for this. I'm thinking I'm on drugs, and I'm like, I don't know what the hell is going on. After this whole vision, this thing that I, for lack of a better term, that I call God, basically what he said was like, I'm going to let you go back. And when you go back, you're going to have some people and some situations in your life that are going to help guide you for what I have for you. And when you detour from that path, these people, places, and things are going to show up and help remind you of what you're supposed to do. If you follow this path, I'm going to give you some gifts. And if you use these gifts, you're going to be able to have a life that's so beyond what you could possibly fathom right now. There'll come a time where the drugs won't even be something that you can compare it to. And in my mind, I'm like, I just don't want to feel how I feel right now, you know? And the next thing I know, boom, I'm back in my bed at the halfway house. You know, I come out of this like dream, like I'm in Wizard of Oz, you know, Dorothy sitting up. Right? I walk out in the living room and my roommates are sitting out there and they're all looking like they see a ghost. And they're like, do you know where you've been for the last few hours? And I was like I could try to tell you, but like, I don't think I can possibly process that right now. And they're like, well, we have something to show you. And they pull out a camcorder. They didn't have cell phones with cameras on them at the time. And they show me, and I'm on the ground inside of the house. And I look like one of those scenes from a scary movie when somebody's possessed. My eyes are totally black. I'm contorting in ways that, you know, and I said, well, what was going on? And they said, well, when you were at the party tonight earlier, we started watching a movie. You fell out, started acting all weird and speaking in tongues and weird, just freaking everybody out. So the security threw you out, and you got this like Herculean strength when he threw you, and you got so violent that we just all decided to leave and had to sit on top of you in the car the whole way home so you didn't kick the windows out. And we figured since you had that much strength, you weren't overdosing. So we wanted to take you home and see if you slept it off, if you'd be fine in the morning. So they showed me the video of me just acting a fool.
Wow.
That whole time I'm having this like vision, and to them, I looked like somebody that was demonically possessed, you know, and that scared me so badly. I never shared that story again. I continued to do drugs and just pretend like that didn't happen. But, you know, I swallowed that story, you know, and I took that with me for the rest of my life, you know, and my brother passes away, and then I end up in rehab a few, you know, 10, however many years later.
This was before that?
This was all before that, right? So when I ended up in rehab in 2014, and my dad says to me, tell them everything, I had never told anybody that story.
That's the first time you told someone that story?
So I told my therapist.
Wow.
And my therapist says to me, have you met a lady here named Rita? And I was like, no. And she goes, well, you promised me before you leave here that you'll talk to Rita and you'll share that same story you just shared with me. I'm like, you don't just think it was like a bad trip? And she's like, I don't know. Talk to Rita. She's like our spiritual counselor. I'm not kidding you, Bryan. No sooner did I tell my counselor, I'll talk to Rita, I promise. She's like, hold on a second. She goes and answers the door. It's this Rita chick, you know? Oh, come on in. I tell her the same story I just told you. And at the end of it, she looking at me, and I thought she was going to look at me like I was crazy or whatever. And she was like, so what do you think all of that means? I'm like, what do you think I mean? You're the therapist. You tell me what you think it means, you know? And she goes, do you know what the term anointing means? And I was like, no. And she was like, well, sometimes people have a very specific purpose that they're supposed to carry out in life. And when they detour from that, just like God said in that vision 12 years before that, God will intervene in your life or send people to intervene in your life to help you get back on track. And I don't think that that vision that you had all those years ago was a bad trip, because if it was a bad trip, most people that have bad trips, it doesn't really make any sense. They start seeing spiders and dragons and freaking out. There's no like narrative. Yours follows like a story, like somebody wrote it specifically for you. And that feels like a personal relationship with a higher power that knows you intimately. How else would he have been able to give you all those details that specifically, basically what she said was, I want you to focus more so on the next 3 weeks while you're here, what God gave you that vision for, not why you're on drugs. And if you can find out why God gave you that vision, I think you'll start to be able to make your recovery work a lot better for you. And so that next few weeks that I was in rehab, like I tried to avoid that lady like the plague because I thought she was fucking nuts. You know what I mean? But the whole time people keep coming up to me going, are you going to go back to Rita? Are you going to go back to Rita? My last week that I'm there, my therapist decides to take a vacation. And because she's out, Rita becomes my therapist while she's gone. So Rita comes in and says, you're going to come talk to me finally. I go in her office and we sit down and we have probably the most spiritually refreshing conversation I've ever had in my life. I've never had anybody pray over me the way she did. I never had anybody introduce God to me the way that she did. She made God seem like this really loving dad that knows me so well that can't help but like try to like just be there for me. So she walked me through this whole process of how to forgive myself and all of this stuff. And then like at the end of it, she was like, do you know why God gave you that vision? Like I asked you a few weeks ago. And having gone through all the things that I went through in the rehab, what I resolved out of all of that was I have this gift that I've been using to my detriment, which is music. Maybe I'm supposed to use this for something else. I'm open to the possibility of God using my music to help people. And I left it at that. And she was like, I think that's enough, you know? And Bryan, I mean, I get out of rehab. 6 months later, one of the kids that I was in rehab with dies. I write him a song for his family. That song goes viral. And that's why I'm sitting here with you today. If that wouldn't have happened, you know, I wouldn't be here.
What's the name of that song?
I redid Fort Minor's Where'd You Go? His song is about being on tour, being on the road, never being home, and his sister and his family wondering when he comes home.
But a lot of people have a different meaning for that song.
Yeah. For me, I associated it with like, where did I go? I lost myself. And when the girl, I'm gonna get choked. When the girl is singing on the hook, where'd you go? I miss you so. Seems like it's been forever since you've been gone. I felt like that was my own family saying that to me. You know what I mean? So when I wrote that, it wasn't like I'm trying to write bars and be dope or anything. It was literally just like my heart was broken. The kid was 18 that I was writing it for, and he was about to have a kid. So he didn't get to meet his daughter. The kid's name's Isaac, getting ready to have a baby and all of this. And that song that goes viral gets me down in Florida. And while I'm in Florida for the first time, I'm at some rally for the addicts' moms. And they had all these, you know, benches and stuff set up for the different resources. And I see one that says, you know, where music helps people and stuff. And I take interest in that. And I go up and introduce myself to the guy that's running the table. I say, what's your name? And he says, my name's Isaac. And I'm like, that's fucking crazy because I'm here right now because I wrote a song for a guy named Isaac. And he says, well, what's your name? And I said, well, my name's Tommy Kraus. Stage name's Tommy Guns. And then he gets to goosebumps. And I'm like, what's up? And he goes, I just lost a friend named Tommy Guns. So we're both standing there in South Florida for my first time at a recovery event. And that guy ended up becoming the guy that got me a job at Recovery Unplugged, which led to me meeting you and why I'm here right now. You know,
wow. So that's how you came to Florida.
That's how I came to Florida. Yeah, I came here with $200 from CD sales, a week's worth of clothes, and my mom bought me a one-way ticket to get here. I didn't even have the job.
So your music blew up at that time?
Or? That's when my music blew up in my first year.
Wow. Yeah.
Nobody outside of like the underground hip hop community knew who I was prior to me getting clean. All of that blew up in my first year, which is why I kind of brought that up at the beginning of this. Is like my first couple of years was so ego based because I had so much confirmation from external things that I was doing great. I leave Florida, I go back up to Michigan, and I'm in a relationship. My side of it was I had no program. Now I'm living with somebody. Now I'm focused entirely on my music, and I was a freaking nut job. You know what I mean? And in that last couple of years, what would that have been, 2016, 17? I just seen a demon come out of me in music in a way that I knew that's not why God gave me this gift. And I kept feeling myself being compromised on my decisions that I wanted to make in an effort to make my music get more famous. And I was basically at a place where I knew that like I was going to start wagering things that I couldn't sell to get where I needed to be in order to make up for other things I had done. And that scared me so badly because I seen it bringing out the worst in people around me that like I just surrendered it one day. Like I got on my knees and I just prayed to God and was like, I know this was a gift that you gave me. I've been doing this thing every day since like 18. I have not missed a day where I haven't written or done something, you know, like this is not why I have music. I didn't get music so that I could make songs that go viral on Pornhub. I didn't get music so that I could sleep with any girl that fucking sees me at a meeting. I was given music as a means to reach other people and in the process heal myself and heal my family, and I wasn't using it for that anymore. So I surrendered that back in like 2018. Wow. I haven't touched music since then. I'm open to it. But my promise I made to God was that like whatever music comes, if he wants me to use it again, that like it's going to be serving a higher purpose. I don't give a shit about Tommy Guns. I don't care about any of that. I mean, I love him. I don't want to see that person get famous. That person doesn't need to get famous. You know what I mean? What I want to do is create situations like the one that I had on the way here with the car ride where like by the time the situation's over, that person leaves that situation feeling like the world is a better place, that people aren't so bad, you know, and shit's so fucked up right now. Like we need that. You know what I mean?
Let's back up. So when you get clean, like you have been introduced to meetings, but like what made you want to dive in? Because, you know, just like how someone gets bit with drugs, like someone gets bit in recovery. Like you'll see how somebody goes to meetings and then you'll see someone get clean or whatever. And then you'll see someone like on fire and you're like, they got bit. You know what I mean? And like, definitely. It's the same thing. Like people ask me all the time, like, how did you get clean? And I'm like, bro, someone put me on. You know, like, just like, how did you smoke crack? Somebody put me on, bro. Someone was like, bro,
12
this
steps
is what you
is like
do.
The mafia, but with all the good parts and like next to none of the bads. Because like once you're in, you're in. People know you everywhere. And no matter where you go, there's somebody that you can touch down with. And they usually got like a weird name. You know what I mean? And they're going to help you out when you get there. So I got sold on NA. I won't say introduced because I got introduced to NA at a very young age and I thought it was some tree hugging hippie bullshit. As soon as everybody got up and kumbaya at the end, I was like, fuck out of here, man. NA bit for me when I had about 90 days. I was struggling really bad with cravings. I was working at the skateboard shop. This kid across from me where I was assembling the skateboards, the part that he was responsible for, he was directly across from me. And I noticed him touching his nose a lot and just doing all the telltale signs of opiates. So I eventually just like asked him, and I hadn't seen drugs since I got out of rehab for that 90 days. So I asked him, like, I don't have any more, but I'll bring some tomorrow. I'm like, all right, sweet. And then I leave and I go home and I narc on myself. I call my sponsor. If he would have had dope, I would have got high today. All right, you're coming with me to a meeting. At the time, he wasn't letting me go to NA because there was too many young women. So we would go to like AA meetings. And the rule was I have nothing to say other than I'm Tommy and I'm an alcoholic and don't speak unless spoken to. So we go to the meeting. I listen to all these people share. And then at the end, they'll look at me and all I was allowed to say was I'm Tommy. And if I would have had money today, I would have got high, you know? And then the next morning I get up, same thing. Still want to get high. I'm like, all right, that guy should have it. When I get to work, I'll get high. I get there, he has it, I chicken out. You know, I'm like, maybe later today. He's like, all right. I go a few hours later that day. I change my mind again, go up to him. Hey, can I get some? Dude, I already did it all. I tried to offer you earlier. I was like, I was relieved that he didn't have it, right? But I go home again that day and I tell my roommates and I tell my 3/4 house monitor and I tell my sponsor and I tell people in the meetings, I want to use it. It's not going away. So now we're going on day 3 of like this shit not coming off of me. Like it wasn't just like a craving and then it would go away. Like all day from the moment I woke up till I went to bed, my dreams were saturated with, I want to get high, I want to get high, I want to get high. You know, on that Friday morning, I got up and basically the decision that I had made for myself was I'm going to get high because if I got 90 days, I can get another 90 days. And at least if I get high, this thing will shut up. And then I can go back to doing what I'm doing. So I leave my house and I go to start walking to work and my sponsor pulls up on me. And he's like trying to make me get in the car. And I'm like, no, I just want some fresh air today. I'm going to go for a walk. And he's like, dude, you've been talking about wanting to get high every day, all day for the last 4 days. And today's your payday. You think I'm letting you get away from me and go get a paycheck? You're out of your fucking mind. Get in the fucking car, you know? And I get in and he's like, how much time do you got right now? And I was like, I think tomorrow I pick up my 90 days, right? And he was like, go in the trunk. So I go in the trunk and I pop it open, and he's got a bunch of basic text in there, and he's got a red t-shirt, and it said like Frontline Recovery on it, which was something him and another guy were doing at the time, I was like, what's this? He's like, that's yours. And this Sunday, you're going to come with me back to the rehab that you just got out of. You're not allowed to say anything. You're not allowed to tell anybody about recovery because you don't know anything about it. But at the very end, if I leave you sometime, you can stand up and say, my name's Tommy, I'm an addict, and I went through this program a few months ago and I'm still clean. Does that sound like something you want to do? And in that moment, all I could think about was like, I'm going to be back in the rehab around the people that just helped me save my life. And there's going to be people in there that know if I'm lying. Clients will know. Therapists might not, mom and dad might not, but another dope fiend sitting across from me is going to call my bullshit out faster than anything. I don't want to go in there a hypocrite. I want to go in there and at least say I'm clean. That's all I was allowed to say, so I want to make sure I'm telling the truth, right? The insanity lifted. And I went to the basically HHAE that Sunday, and I got a taste of it. And then we left there and we went to another treatment center. And then we left there and we went to another treatment center. And then he's like, this is what I do. Why don't you start doing this with me? So every weekend he started taking me to men's rehabs, co-ed rehabs. We didn't do any female rehabs. We were always giving back. And I had never had the obsession to use lifted from me prior to that. So the combination of like literally being consciously aware that I just felt the obsession get lifted from me because God used my sponsor and my ego to keep me from being a hypocrite, getting high and then going to a meeting that Sunday and telling people how I did it. HHAE, even though I wasn't like official with HHAE, I was still going in and doing it. No matter how fucked up my life was, when I would go in there and I would leave, I always felt better. Not because I was judging other people like, oh, I'm doing better than them, but just because I was like, fuck, man, like,
it's an interesting feeling when you have like this horrible malady, disease that you like hate that you have, and then you go somewhere and you tell someone that you have it and they have it.
Yeah.
But you figured out a way to kind of deal with it without, committing suicide.
Right.
And you remember being there. And even though I'm not totally put together now,
right,
I'm not 2 days clean, fucking head spinning. And there's some hope in that. And then that person comes out and says, yeah, I remember you when you fucking spoke.
Yep.
You start to get like a little pep in your step, and you start to smile a little bit more, and you start to get a purpose, and you start to think that maybe there was a reason I went through all this pain, and and then and maybe the praying does do something. You know what I mean? Maybe the book does mean something. Maybe like this whole shit does work. Yeah. Because when you like the literature says like like when I tell someone about the program and that it works, I reinforce my own belief that it works.
Yeah, man. Yeah, dude, NA is like this thing. 12 steps are like this thing where I should like, the attraction for me in the beginning was I was obsessing over something besides getting high. Now I'm obsessing over how can I, when I go back in next Sunday, am I going to give them the same message, or can I like add something to it to make it funny? Or can I add a little anecdote that like makes the story have a little bit more depth? You know what I mean? And my obsession started to shift more towards how can I carry this message more effectively so it's not just boring and monotonous, And the people that I was with at the time, we were all part of this like HHAE clique, where we would go out and just try to carry the message everywhere we could, even if it wasn't a 12-step based thing. We were going into colleges and just anywhere we could go to try and help get people some information we were doing. And I was having a blast. These people were hilarious. They had a lot of fun. They broke laws way worse than I did. You shared about it at a meeting one night. You heard some old lady sharing when you first got clean, and it was like watching better than TV for you. Because like you pictured this like little Jewish lady had nothing in common with you, and then she ends up being more about it than like any of your plugs, right? And that's kind of what started happening. Like, I'm sitting with my friend Jeannie, and Jeannie, like if you meet her now, she just looks like this like sweet lady that works in an office, and she's telling me about robbing banks and like riding her way on a bicycle and shit. And I'm just like, these people are fucking nuts, and they're clean. Yeah. And they're having fun. So the initial attraction to me was like, it didn't seem like a punishment anymore. It felt like a relief. I went from saying I have to go to meetings to I get to. That was a big change. The music stuff started taking off. That was a big change. I had a couple in the program that offered me to move in with them around 9 months clean out of my sober living home. And they offered me to move in with them and said, this would have been December 2014. They said, stay with us through the winter. You don't need a job. We got you on cigarettes, food. We're going to help you with your music. We're going to help you.
I remember helping you move to a place off Atlantic and US 1.
Yeah. Yep. When I got in with them, you know, they really doubled down on my music career for me at 9 months clean, which was foreign to me. I had a guy, I thought the guy was mad at me because I was hanging out with his fiance and he was like trying to like get a hold of me, and I was avoiding talking to him because I figured he was going to be like, why are you hanging out with my fiance? And he was trying to get a hold of me because his fiance had been showing him my music and he wanted to like help me start selling t-shirts with my name on it.
Oh, that's cool.
So I finally get on the phone with this guy thinking like he wants to beat my ass. And instead he's like, no, dude, I don't care about any of that. Like, I trust my fiance. I know she wouldn't be hanging out with somebody who's not supposed to. Like, I see something in you and this is what somebody did for me. So move in with us for the next few months, focus on your music. And then, you know, when spring comes around, you can look for a job then. And that 3-4 months that I had, all I did during that time was just go to meetings, and I would come home and I would write music and I would sell my CDs and I would sell my t-shirts, and I was making a living off of music for the first time in my life, you know. And as I'm coming up on my year, a couple in the program came to one of my shows, and afterwards they were like, hey, you know, World Convention's going to be in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil this year. And I was like, yeah, like I live on top ramen and like sell CDs so I can get on the bus. Like Rio de Janeiro ain't happening, you know? And they were like, well, we don't have kids and this is kind of the way that we give back. So what if we covered like your plane ticket, helped you get your passport and your visa, and all you have to do is come up with like walking around money while you're down there, and you'll be in Brazil with us for 2 weeks. Oh, and if you want, you can bring your house manager with you since you guys are tight. So they brought me and my friend Robert, who passed away earlier this year, at 1 year clean. He had a few more years than I did, but this couple and all their friends from like Europe paid for our entire trip to go to Rio de Janeiro, Brazil for the 12-step program I'm a part of's World Convention.
Wow. Yeah, I remember that convention. I didn't go, but yeah.
Yeah, and I'd never been like, dude, I barely, like, the closest to like traveling was like going to Tijuana to drink when I was 18. Like, you know what I mean? So, you know, at a year clean, I'm flying on a 16-hour flight to another part of the world, and like I get there, and if I wasn't sold entirely on the program before then, that whole weekend changed the entire course of my life, because 12-step program before that to me was like, I was convinced that the courts, the police, and something else had created this program just to get rid of us. Go there, tell them there's 12 steps and let them turn it into whatever they want just so they leave us alone and stay out of jail. That's what I thought it was. I thought they were all in cahoots together. I had no idea there was like a larger fellowship, that people actually wanted to be a part of it. They weren't just required. I get down there. It's my first night there. I feel like I'm at like a World Cup tournament because everybody's running around with flags. Nobody's speaking English. They're all cheering like their team just won, and like people are walking up to you asking you to like sign their basic texts and shit. And so I'm like telling people I'm from Canada, you know, because like I didn't want people to know. In my mind, I'm like, other countries don't like Americans, so if I tell them I'm an American, I'm gonna get jumped in Rio. Wow. You know what I mean? So I had this whole like concoction in my head of like, I'm Canadian, blah blah blah. So funny. And like everybody's trying to get me to relax. And like, so the first night there, I usually share this when I share my story just to help newcomers see like why this is so important. But my first night there, I'm lying, telling people I'm from Canada. I'm trying to cut off and like not like get close with people and stuff. And they do this thing the first night at the World Convention where they show every country from A to Z's flag. And when that flag comes up,
you stand up, right?
If you're from that country, you go nuts.
Yeah, you stand up.
And so
scream,
we're in Brazil. They were doing all these South American countries, and like they're going crazy, right? And as it's getting closer and closer to like United States, the people around me are like, "Are you going to jump up when they say America?" I'm like, "Fuck no, man! I told you I'm Canadian. Like, and let nobody know that I'm here, man.
Wow.
Let them know. And then what? We're going to all get beat up after the convention, like, you know?" And they're just like, "Dude, like it's not like that. Calm down, you know." And so when it gets to the American flag and they put it up, as soon as they say America or United States of America, everybody in the convention turns to where all the Americans were standing and they all start walking towards us. I'm backing up at this point now. I'm like, see, I freaking knew it. I'm like backing up, you know? And the guy that paid for my trip, Mike Mooney, looked down at me and he's like, "Will you just calm down? You know, like nobody's here to hurt you." And as he's saying it to me, I'm realizing as these people are walking towards me, they're saying thank you, because I at least knew that in some languages. And I'm hearing multiple people saying thank you in different languages. And I look over and they're saying it with tears in their eye, like heartfelt. They're crying with their arms out, trying to hug me as if like I helped them. And I don't even know who they are. And I look over at Mike and I'm like, what the fuck is happening right now? And he's like, most of the countries that are here at this convention are lucky to even be able to have a 12-step program there. a lot of these countries, they still treat addicts like they kill them and leave them in the streets. They have no sober living, no three-quarter house, no nothing. NA has had to be diplomatic in that sense by going into those countries and proving to them that this works and it doesn't cost them anything. So the reason why they're thanking you is because Americans created a program that is saving millions of people's lives all over the world, and that's all that they have. So they're thanking you because they have the same freedom that you have. And even though they might not be Americans living under a free flag, they have a freedom that they might not have never known in their country. So he's telling me that, and I'm just like, he's like, do you still feel like you're not part of something bigger, you know? And then they all come over, they hug, and then we get in the prayer circle for the serenity prayer.
Yeah.
And when you hear 70 plus, look at this.
Yeah.
When you hear 70 plus languages reciting the serenity prayer simultaneously, that's the closest thing to heaven I can imagine, man. You know, like everybody getting along, nobody fighting, everybody praying together for something that used to kill all of us. I was all in after that, man. You know, I realized I found my tribe because most of the people there didn't speak English, but we still talked and like couldn't, sometimes the only thing we could say to each other was like, just for today, just for today. But it was like, we knew what that meant. As that night kind of came to an end, I ended up getting to meet a girl from Brazil, which I wanted to do. And she was in the program. And she took me out to eat for sushi. And like, she told me on the way there, English is her third language. That it's Portuguese first, then Spanish, then English. That she's an MMA fighter. She could totally beat my ass. You know what I mean? And I think she was pretty much just like laying it all out. Like, if you get weird, you're going to disappear. I'll fuck you up, right? So we're sitting there eating and stuff. And it was like so awkward because like we don't speak the same language. So like we're just throwing out random phrases to see if the other person gets it, you know? And it's like, you know, you like music, I like music. You like food, I like food, you know? And eventually it gets to this place where she's just like, I have to ask you something, but it might sound embarrassing. I don't know if it's going to sound right in English. And I was like, yeah, go ahead. And she goes, you have a number 13 on your face. What does that mean? And it's right here. You know, I didn't have my brother's name next to it at the time. So here I am thinking, what if she thinks I'm like an MS-13 gang member or like, you know, something that's in Brazil that I don't know about. So I'm like, how do I explain to her that like, I'm not a thug, that I just got this tattoo to honor my brother. It's his hockey number. So I'm saying all this stuff. And eventually either she realized that like, I'm not who she thought, or she understood what I was saying and she just starts laughing hysterically. And I'm like, what's so funny? And she's like, well, I don't know if it's the same in America, but in my country, my sponsor, she tells me that a 13th step is very bad. And I just want to make sure that you're not, you know. And I just start dying, bro, because I'm so like, dude, I've looked at the basic text inside and out. I've read every IP. I've read every piece of recovery, and nowhere in there does it even say the word 13th step. But yet here I am 3,000 miles away from home.
And they know what it is.
And somebody's sponsor just cockblocked me.
Wow.
You know, or at least
the 13th step.
With the 13th step, there you go. Right? So we laughed. We ended up having a good time. That night, there was like some heavy metal band that was playing.
Did you 13 step her?
She technically me, because I only had a year at the time. The people that brought me there said she was my peer coach. They're like, are you going to hang out with your Brazilian peer coach today? So, but yeah, it was cool, man. You know, like the first night we hung out, we didn't sleep together right away. You know what I mean? It was just kind of like, I'm in Brazil with a totally different person right now, and I'm just going to appreciate this moment. I also didn't bring a phone with me when I went to Brazil. I'm like, I'm going to go to Brazil with no phone.
Wow, you went with no phone?
No phone. I'm going to raw dog it, Plus, I was kind of hoping like I'd get stuck, to be honest with you. I didn't want to leave Brazil.
Wow.
I was hoping somebody there was going to be like, you're staying here. And I had to go all the way to the other side of the world to realize no matter how dark it's gotten for me, no matter how many times I've thought like this isn't working, I can at least go to an NA meeting and still feel like I'm at home.
For sure.
Nothing else in my life has ever given me that.
Yeah, I always tell people like this is the Thanksgiving dinner that's 365.
Yeah.
Every single day of the year. And there are times where I go to meetings sweaty from the gym, whatever. Like I really do not care when I'm there. It's like the one place that I can go to that I just feel like I can be myself. There are people that have known me there since I was a kid.
Yeah.
Like
you started when you were 18, right?
17.
Yeah.
So I mean,
how old are you now?
31.
So you grew up.
Yeah, so it's like that is my home. It is like my playground. It's my office. It's my classroom.
Right.
It is where I learned how to socialize, where I had my first friend.
Yep.
It's where I came to believe in God.
Yeah.
It's where I prayed for the first time. It's where I still like rest in peace Steve Burdick, you know, like I remember being so broken and fucked up and raising my hand in the meeting like scared to share. And I remember this guy Steve Burdick would be like,
rest in peace, man. I remember him.
Yeah. I remember he would be like, hey, man, you're never going to get called on like that.
Yeah.
And he was like, you got to raise your hand super high.
Yeah.
And I remember
I'll
I was
be doing
like,
this.
Yeah, I'd be like, oh, I have something to say. And he's like, you matter. We need you here. You're important. And I was like, I'm important?
Yeah.
People want to hear from me?
Yeah.
You know, people are so vulnerable and broken when they first get clean. Like, little words impact us forever. Forever.
Yeah.
I still remember someone remembering my name.
Yeah, I was just going to bring that up. That feeling when you go to a meeting and they go, hey, Bryan, why don't you sit with us? And you're like,
yeah.
Really? Recovery lately for me has been less about like, I'm working this step and I'm in this meeting and I'm going over this, and more like, case in point, like I'm with my mom right now. I'm staying with her. I haven't stayed with my mom since I was a teenager. My mom doesn't have a program. I do. She's not doing anything that hurts me, but I have to remember that as she's sharing her experience with her trauma, that sometimes it might feel personal. So what NA's done for me is allow me to not take what she's saying personally, sidestep it, let her share her truth and not tell her her experience is wrong, and then focus back in on the love. You guys taught me that. You guys taught me the ability to see a mistake that I made with loving eyes. I get to do that for my mom now. I get to do that for my family. They don't have to go do drugs and end up in NA to have this.
Yeah, of course.
I get to save them that experience. And hopefully just me sharing my hell that I went through and not being a degenerate as a result of it, but actually turning out semi-decent, that like it inspires them too. You know, because eventually there's going to come a time where my mom's probably going to ask me like, what happened that changed for you? And when I get to introduce her to my relationship with the God of my understanding and like help her build that so that she can forgive herself, that's why I'm here. Before when I started this conversation with you, Bryan, I think my point in trying to show you was that like my first few years I was so focused on like trying to make Tommy Guns cool that I missed out on like what Tommy Kraus really enjoyed. And that's my family, that's genuine friends, that's being appreciated for creativity. Like I brought you a shirt here tonight, and it felt better giving you that shirt and watching you light up than it would have been like, Bryan, listen to my new song. Yeah. Right? I still get to be creative. God might put music back in my life. I'm open to when that happens. And if and when it does, like I can't wait to share that with you guys too. But like I'm in Florida. I'm back. I'm not running away. I'm going to continue to do the things that I did years ago when I was here. And I hope that anybody that's listening to this, even if like maybe you're not a drug addict, maybe you're not an alcoholic, the commonality that every human being has is we all have trauma. Every single one of us has some kind of trauma we went through. And it's really easy for you to say, well, your trauma is not like, oh, I didn't lose a brother to suicide, or I didn't watch my family get murdered, or I wasn't raped, or I wasn't this. Just because the trauma that you experienced doesn't sound as dangerous or traumatizing as something somebody else went through does not mean that it didn't have an effect on your growth, your ability to connect intimately with other people, your ability to trust, your ability to feel safe around people that are there to do nothing more than to help you, not hurt you. So anybody that's listening to this, if you have any kind of trauma, you have any issues, and you see me and Bryan or anybody that he has on here laughing about this kind of stuff, it's not that we're laughing because it doesn't hurt. It's that we've worked on it to such a degree that we can talk about it, and reliving it doesn't cause us pain anymore. It's like reading a book. Yeah. You know, I think that's probably one of the greatest gifts that like recovery can give me, is that like once I figure out how to heal myself, I can be of service outside of the 12-step meetings too. And seeing really the biggest gifts that I'm getting right now is seeing how my mother is around me. For sure. You know what I mean? Like that's my most recent gift, at least, that I can think of. And a lot of people have listened to this show that aren't addicts and been like, wow, I had a friend of mine who struggled for drugs for years and I never understood. I have people that message me that are like, this is teaching me so much about parenting. I'm like, parenting? Yeah. And they're like, yeah, parent. Yeah. And I never thought about that perspective, you know? Yeah, the last month before I came here, every Tuesday I was sitting it wasn't a women's meeting, but it was it was a meeting that had a women's table. Yeah. And I started sitting there because all of the girls that were at the table all had a program that I knew they were serious about. And they were all moms struggling to like reestablish their relationship with their kids. So I was trying to see what a mom felt like. Not just a recovering mom, but just a mom in general, what they felt like their fears of how their son might reject them again, or if they say they love their kid, like how are they going to respond to it, you know? And like listening to all of that gave me the tools to be able to sit down with my own mom and see how she sees me without having to tell her that, you know what I mean? Sure. Like just putting myself in her shoes and being like, this is a woman who I've terrified with my choices. She's probably deep down worried that at any point I could go back to who I was. And she's a mom. So the best thing that I can do for her is like, while I'm here and spending time with her, is just like consistently reaffirm to her that I love her, that she did a good job, that who I became is not a result of the bad choices that she made, but a result of the morals that she instilled in me. And I made a lot of poor choices that disrespected that stuff, but I made it back to me, and I get to share that now with my mom, with people who love me and have wanted nothing but the best for me. You know what I mean? So I'm very hopeful about the future of that much, I'm sure, with as crazy as the world is. NA has still given me that like undeniable hope that like things will get better.
Hey, well, I appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you for having me, man. It was awesome. I feel like I'm like sweating like Michael Jackson in the daycare right now.
It's getting hot in here.
Yeah.
Well, hey, man, we definitely got to do like a part 2. I really have like a lot more questions just about like all the other stuff you've done outside of like the 12-step program. And, you've always been somebody that like I've just been very fond of because like I see the way that you make a recovery like attractive for so many other people. And like honestly, like when I got clean, like I listened to this one speaker tape and this kid got clean really young and his sponsor was like, when you get clean, you see a young person, you pull them in. Then you see another young person, you pull them in. You see another young person, you pull them in. And like, that kind of like always stuck with me. And like sometimes like, we have a way to be pushy with people that they respect it.
Yes.
And we have a way to be like your sponsor did, like shut the fuck up and get in the car. We're going to go do this today.
Yeah.
For me, like Hell Has an Exit has been something that I want to do that's creative.
Yeah.
Because like I've lost that, busy with work and just, running a business and like this is what I really enjoy doing, like this is really cool for me. And it's something that's platform. Like time-stamped forever.
Yeah.
Where like this is something that's like a real resource forever. So I appreciate
I'm extremely grateful for it. You got me to share my own hell story that I never share unless it's like, I've shared that with like intimate relationships and stuff, but at podium level, it's tough because it sounds insane to me when I share it. But looking back now, what I went through, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, to me, having that experience at that time, nobody could have told me, 20-something or 15 years later, I'm going to be on a show called Hell Has an Exit with a guy asking me what hell was like for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's just, I'm very grateful that I live in a time where like we can do something like this and this information can get out there like that.
For sure.
That we can get the solution out there just as quick as the problem is getting out there. And so keep it up, man. This is awesome. And I would love to come back on here and talk about anything. So
love you, bro.
Thank you. I love you too, Bryan. Thank you for having me. Shout out Drew. Real quick, I want to shout out Drew real quick, right? This is one thing that Drew did that really left an impact on me. One, because I couldn't even spell Maserati when I first came down here. Two, because I was at a meeting and I remember him getting up, maybe it was for his medallion or something, and he said something that stuck and he goes, people always come up to me and ask me how I got a Maserati, but they never ask me how I worked the 12 steps, and the answers are the exact same, and when he said that, at the time, everybody that was coming up to ask me to sponsor them were all the little like SoundCloud rappers getting out of rehab, and like, none of them wanted to actually work the steps. They were all just like, dude, I'm going to do my 4th step with you in a song and you're going to be like a guest in the video. And I'm like, that's not what this is. You know what I mean? So Drew saying that then, like, one, it let me know that he was watching and seeing how people were. But two, like, he was looking at me when he said it, and it felt like he was letting me know that, like, you're going to have people come up to you for the wrong reasons. And you need to be able to tell them the reason why you're here.
To not to
teach them how to do that, but to teach them how to do this, and I'm really grateful for that, man. So thank you guys for having me. Thank you.
Hey, love you, bro.
Yeah, love you too, man.
This show is not affiliated with any specific 12-step program. If you or a loved one is struggling with an addiction, please find a local 12-step meeting. If you believe you may need detox or drug treatment of any kind, please call 833-999-1877 to speak to a specialist. The show is sponsored by United Recovery Project, a state-of-the-art drug and alcohol rehab facility. You can visit our website at unitedrecoveryproject.com.